Hello there, this is Simon from Tokyo Productions and welcome to another tutorial for Motion 5. And this time around we're going to be looking at creating this beveled text effect entirely inside Motion using some very basic tools. So why would we want to create this in Motion when we could simply just jump into Photoshop if we had it? Well, there are a couple of reasons. Maybe you don't have Photoshop, but even if you do have Photoshop, I think you can create some much more interesting looks this way. The other aspect is that because you can control all the layers, you can create some pretty interesting animated effects. And the other interesting thing is that if you are a user of Final Cut Pro 10, you could create this as a title and then publish it, and you'd have a load of control over a really interesting effect that is simply not achievable any other way. So anyway, let's jump in and see how it all works. I'm going to be using a project that's 1920-1080. If you are choosing a different size, just bear in mind that some of the offset numbers that I give you will need to be scaled down or up accordingly. If you wanted to use this as a Final Cut title, then I would suggest you start with the title template. Okay, first of all, I'm going to come to my library and generators, and I'm going to make a background, and I'm going to use the gradient generator. Apply that. Come to the inspector, open the gradient editor, and I'm going to set the type to a radial. I'm going to set the Y start to 540 and the Y end to 960. Then I'm going to edit these colours, the left hand colour, click on that. I'm going to set these numbers to 0.3, 0.5, 0.7 and the right hand colour to 0, 0 and 0.1. So I'm going to call that background, and I'm going to hit Command-Shift-N to make a new group. I'm going to call that group base, because this is going to be my base text layer. I'll come back to the library, and again I'll apply the gradient generator. Come to the inspector, twirl open the gradient. And the reason I'm using a gradient is that you can come back in and you can create some really interesting effects as against using a color solid. So that's why I'm using it. But in actual fact, in this instance, I'm just going to throw away one of these tabs and use it as though it were a color. So I'm going to drag that off there. So I'm left with just one color tab. And I'm going to set that single color to 0.6. 0.9 and 1. And then I'm going to hit Command-Shift-M to make an image mask. And I'm going to take my text layer and drag it to that mask source. And now my gradient is being masked by the text. Now just to let you know what I'm doing here, I'm using a font called An Unfortunate Event, and that comes from dafont.com. There you go, dafont.com. If you type in unfortunate event, you can download that and you could follow along with the tutorial with the same font. Okay, let's skip back, and I'm going to rename this face. There we go. And I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to come to the image mask itself, come to the library, filters, stylize, and I'm going to use the min-max filter and apply it to the image mask. Come to the inspector, and I'm just going to set that radius to 1 because I want to shrink that down by roughly a pixel or 2. So there you go. 1 on the radius is just shrinking that a little bit. Okay, let's make a new group above this base layer, Command Shift N, and let's call that Edges. Then let's take our face group, hold down the Alt key and drag it to that new group and let go. And I'm going to rename this Dark. So this is going to be the darker side of the bevel. And because it's going to be dark, I'm going to set this gradient color to black. There we go. And I'm also going to delete that min-max. And then that fringing goes away. My next step is to duplicate the image mask. So Command D, I'm going to call that image mask offset. And I'm going to set the mask blend mode to subtract. And now here comes the part that really drives the whole thing. I'm going to come to the mask offset values and I'm going to type -5 for X and +5 for Y. And I think you can see that already that's starting to create an interesting effect. Next I'm going to take that min-max filter from my face, hold down the Alt key and drag it over the image mask offset to make a copy. So come to its properties and I'm going to set the radius to 4. So you can see what that's doing. That's creating a really nice deep dark bevel. And to give it a bit more subtlety, because it's very sharp now, here we go. We're going to come to the blur. We're going to add a Gaussian blur just above that min-max. Come to the inspector and we'll set the amount to 10. And I don't know whether you can see if I zoom in. So turn the blur on and off. That's just rounded off those very sharp edges just a bit. Okay, and then we are going to come to the dark layer, properties, set the blend mode to multiply and the opacity to 95%, just to fade it off back into that base layer color. Next up, we're going to duplicate this dark layer, Command D, and we're going to call it light, because this is going to be the other side of the bevel, the bright side. We're going to come to the gradient and we're going to set this color to white. Again, the reason for using that gradient is because we can make some much more interesting effects if we want to get really snazzy with it. Okay, so next up I'm going to take that min-max filter and I'm going to copy it to the main image mask for this layer just to tidy things up. There we go, Alt drag, and I'm going to set the radius to 1 as we did before. That just tucks it in behind everything else. So then I'm going to come to the image mask offset for light and image mask, there we go. This offset value I'm going to set to the exact opposite of what we had before. So 5 and -5. Let's zoom in. And obviously this is currently set to multiply, which we don't want. So I'm going to set it to add instead, the blend mode. There we go. And probably turn it all the way up to 100. So now if we turn that on and off, you can see we've got our bright edge. And I just need to move that down behind the dark layer. So I'm going to hit Command forward square bracket. That's the key next to the P on the keyboard. So Command forward square bracket, pops it back down underneath the dark, and that just looks better. Right, next I'm going to come to the dark layer and duplicate it, Command D, and I'm going to call it dark shading. And I'm going to just delete those Gaussian blur and min-max filters. And the image offset mask, I'm just going to set both of those offset values to 2, 2. So let's zoom in a bit so we can see what that's doing. That for me just tidies it up a bit, gives a nice sharp edge even where we've got that highlight. So that's the point of that. Now let's give a bit more interest to the face. So we'll come back down to our base group and we will select the face layer, hit Command D and rename that face detail. I'm going to delete that min-max filter and I'm going to come to the gradient editor. I'm going to leave the light color as is. That's maybe just reduce the green a bit. There we go. And I'm going to duplicate that tab, move it to 50%, and then I'm going to set this color to 0, 0.15 and 0.35. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and drag it to roughly 20%. Well, actually, let's go exactly 20%. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and drag this lighter color to the middle of those two. And again, hold down the Alt key and drag it all the way to the left. Then I'm going to adjust the Y start and end values. So 480 for the start and minus 480 for the end. And if I turn that on and off, you can see how much interest that's given to the face. Let's come to the filters, stylize, and I'm going to apply hatched screen. And this is because I want a nice metallic texture. So apply that and come to the inspector, make a few adjustments. I'm going to set the angle to 95, the scale to 0.5, the stretch to minus 0.1, and then I'm going to mix it back to 50%. And that's just given a nice texture. I like it anyway. Right, now I want that to be a little bit more interesting, so not just sit right across the face. And in order to do that, I'm going to come to my image mask for the face detail, come to the library, filters, come up to blur, Gaussian blur, and I'm going to drag that to the image mask. Come to the inspector, I'm going to set the amount to 25, and I just want to reduce the vertical amount to 75. Now that's looking completely wrong. What it appears to have done is expanded it outside the area of the letters, and that's not what I want to do. I want to shrink it inside. And now this is a really good trick to know. We're going to come to the library and color correction, levels, and I'm going to drag a levels filter just above that Gaussian blur. Open up the inspector, twirl open the controls. In the opacity, I'm going to set the black in to 0.99. And now that levels control has shrunk the alpha channel for that layer. So we've got a a shrunken version of it, and I think that looks really, really nice, really sophisticated. So that's quite a clever trick. So blur followed by a levels control to effectively crop in on the blur and shrink it down. It's very similar to the built-in matte magic control, but this is a lot more effective. Okay, so come to the face detail properties, and I'm going to set that blend mode to multiply. I think that just looks a little bit nicer, a little bit more of the base colour coming through. Right, next up I'm going to come to the background layer, and just above it I'm going to make a group, Command-Shift-N, and I'm calling that Effects. And I just wanted to show you really how you'd go about creating either a drop shadow or a glow effect. So first of all, let's start out with how you'd make a drop shadow. Obviously you can use the built-in one, but it's worth knowing that you can extend this whole technique all the way through to all the possible layer styles. So I'm going to select the face, and I'm going to drag it rather, to my effects group, and I'll rename that shadow. Keep scrolling down, we've got loads of stuff happening. I'll close up that edges group just to make life a bit easier, and maybe even close the base group. And I'll come to the gradient, and I'm going to make this a very dark blue, 0, 0, and 0.1. And I can throw away the min-max filter. And what I'll do is I'll come to the image mask offset again, and set a value of 30 and -20. And obviously that's created a nice drop shadow. Let's come to the library, filters, blur, add a Gaussian blur, and I need to add it to the image mask. Come to the inspector. I'm going to set the amount to 65 and come to the properties. Properties for the shadow layer. Set the blend mode to multiply, why not? And the opacity to 70%. And there we've got a very nice drop shadow. You could scale it up, you could do all sorts of interesting things with it, probably rotate it as well. So that's quite handy. But let's actually make a glow instead. So I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to turn off the shadow layer, call this glow, come to the image mask, I'm going to zero out that offset, and I'm going to set the color of this generator, gradient generator, to 0.65, 0.8 and 0.95. I think I might just reduce the opacity down to 70%, clicking on that top tab there, typing in the opacity value, and then come to the properties, set the blend mode to screen. And there you go, we have a glow around the edges of the text. We can make it smaller or larger using the Gaussian blur. Very nice effect. If we wanted to fade off towards the bottom, we'd come back to the generator. We could set an opacity tab on the right, and we could turn that down to about 20. And now that's even more interesting looking, because the glow is fading off down towards the bottom just as the background is getting darker. So that's pretty cool. So let's actually turn that off, because I think I prefer the drop shadow in this instance. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to come to the top of my project, make a new group, Command-Shift-N, and I'm going to call it Finish or something, because I want to add a lens flare as a final effect. I'll come to my generators, add the lens flare, apply it, I'll turn on the overlays, command /. Down here I'll select the adjust item tool, and I'll drag the center of the lens flare just to the point of the Y there, where I want it. Turn off the overlays, command /. I'll come to the inspector for the lens flare. I'll set the outer color to 0, 0.1 and 0.65. I'll set the ring radius down to 0, don't want a ring. And I'll adjust the size to 500. I quite like that. And next in this group, because we've got a gradient and a lens flare, this, when it's compressed and sent to YouTube, could cause a whole load of problems. And there's a very easy way of going around this, and you really should know about it. So let's come back to our library, generators, noise, and I'm going to apply that. So this is above everything else. Come to the inspector, properties, set the blend mode to overlay, and the opacity down to 10. And that, without having changed the look too much, is going to ensure that there is no banding. Very, very important trick to know about. The number of professional motion graphics jobs that don't observe this rule is quite depressing. So don't be one of those guys. Okay, so that's pretty much finished. There's a few things I wanted to show you, just little refinements. So if we come back down to the face generator, we can click on this color tab, open up the color picker, and really we can just very easily change the color of everything just by changing that face color. Very nice indeed. So if you were publishing this to Final Cut, you'd certainly publish this face generator gradient. Now the other thing you've spotted is that the offsets for the dark and the light sides of the bevel are really the key to making this whole effect work. So a good trick would be to add them to a rig. So I've already got a rig set up here, and I've got two widgets, one of which is up and one of which is down, and I've set a minimum and a maximum range of -10 to 10. So I'll come to my light image mask offset. I'll twirl open the offset controls. I'll drag the X value to left and right, X being left and right obviously, and I'll drag the Y value to up and down, and I'll do exactly the same thing with the dark. So twirl it open, the X value to left and right, and the Y value to up and down. And let's just set up this widget, set up both widgets. So let's type -10 to set up the blur value. So I'm going to type -10 and +10. Come to the other end and we'll do 10 and -10. So let me just move that, and you can see how we can actually change the direction of the light on that bevel. Very nice. And let's do exactly the same thing for the up and down. Go to -10. We'll set a value of 10 and -10. Come to the other end, set a value of -10 and 10. And again, if we move that slider, you can see we can shift where the light is coming from, if it's coming from the above or below. Very good. I would advise you that, just as with Photoshop layer styles, that if you push it all too far, the whole thing can fall apart. So you need to be sensible and look at the nature of the type that you're applying your effect to. and just not go too far so it doesn't break up. Okay, so I hope that was an interesting tutorial. Thanks very much indeed for watching. I very much hope this has given you ideas about how to develop this in any number of different ways of your own, and I'd love to see what you might get up to. So please share that if you have something that you're particularly pleased with. Thanks very much indeed for watching, and I hope to see you again next time.